moving on to something that people actually cared about. We're going to come back to Divinity here, and we'll talk about all the stuff that's come out since the Game Awards. So the big thing that everyone was wondering after the Divinity trailer came out was, is this going to be an action RPG or is this going to be a turn-based RPG? Because the Divinity series as a whole has kind of a weird grouping of different games with different styles. The first two Divinities were ARPGs in Divine Divinity and Beyond Divinity. And then Original Sin 1 and 2 were turn-based RPGs. And then Dragon Commander is actually an RTS, though it kind of fits into this weird section of the Divinity world where they're like trying something different. And then I don't remember if Divinity 2, I don't remember. I assume that one's an ARPG, but I'm not remembering off the top of my head. Anyway, so people were wondering what kind of an RPG is this going to be? They said it's going to be the biggest one they've ever made. They're going to push all the boundaries and all of that. But what kind of RPG is it? And in his interviews after the fact, Sven told us that it is in fact going to be another turn-based RPG, which to me was a little interesting because I figured, okay, you're going with the naming nomenclature of the ARPG games. They didn't call it Original Sin 3 or something like that. So I thought, oh, maybe this is going to go back to the action RPG roots, kind of like Owlcat Games with now doing Osiris Reborn as an action RPG. But no, they decided to go turn-based with it. How do you feel about that part specifically?
That part specifically, when this news first dropped, I was like, well, what did people expect from Larian after having made three of the best turn-based RPGs over the last like 15 years? And then looking into the history of the Divinity series, it's like, oh, well, it wasn't always that. So I can kind of understand why people might have been asking this question. That being said, I still think it was always kind of a shoe-in that this was going to be turn-based, just based on the original Sin games and Baldur's Gate being massive hits, and a lot of that is because of the turn-based system. So,
It's interesting. I think, and part of what Sven says in his interviews has been you don't need to know anything or have played the other games to be able to play this game.
mm-hmm.
And so I think that's where the Divinity with no two or three or original sin or anything like that kind of comes into play, where they're
Okay, yeah,
considering it kind of like a reset almost. We don't really know what the story is going to look like because as is Sven is kind of notorious for having said back in the day he didn't really care about continuity or storylines across games or anything like that. So
mm-hmm.
there was a lot of kind of stuff that happened and then would be just immediately uh, overwritten by the next game, like in the
yeah,
original Divinity games. So it seems like they're kind of coalesce all of that together into this one and come with kind of a more continuous story here, and we'll get something going forward. So that'll be interesting to see. Some of the other stuff that he talked about in the interviews is it's going to be single player. There will be cooperative multiplayer like Baldur's Gate 3. They've been working on this game for 2 years. Mostly, it seems like in pre-production, but they're now like into full-on production of this game. And they're not sure if they're going to do early access like they did with Baldur's Gate. And I don't know if you can consider Original Sin 1 and 2 like they did Kickstarters, so there's like a version of early access, I guess.
yeah.
But they're not, they said most likely, but they're not sure if they're going to do early access for this one. I kind of think personally, you should take your swing and just not do early access. I don't know. Do you have a strong opinion one way or the other on that?
Not necessarily. I know with Baldur's Gate 3 is a bit of a different situation because I think they were trying to get that out on Stadia before that ultimately failed. But I think for a game like this where the story, for this and Baldur's Gate, I don't know. I think there's merit to it. If the story is one of your big selling points that you want people to experience going through it for the first time, then maybe you don't. But if you're priding yourself on the fact that this is going to be a bigger game than Baldur's Gate 3 and it's going to have more different opportunities to play your character in a way that you see fit, I could see that working for them.
Hmm.
So I don't know. It really depends. I mean, Larian just in general is really good at listening to community feedback. So it's almost like we're not getting any more patches for Baldur's Gate 3, of course, but like when that game came out, it was like, okay, we hear your feedback. Here's this. Oh, here's that. Like to the point that we got a patch like earlier this year that had like a bunch of new subclasses. So I feel like it doesn't make too much of a difference to me, but like they could easily get away with another early access. But even when the game launches, it still kind of feels like it's never done until like, okay, we're putting our foot down. That was the last patch. So
Right. That was all the, we'll call it good news out of what Sven said. There is some a controversial point that he was making in these interviews too, and I'll quote him here specifically. But this is on using generative AI and developing Divinity. And he said they're using it to, and this is where the quote starts, explore ideas, flesh out PowerPoint presentations, develop concept art, and write placeholder text. Uh, I think the one that people really had a problem with is the develop concept art part, especially because he kind of specifically said that all of the final text is going to be written by writers and all of the game is going to be coded by coders. So there was kind of drawing a distinction between all of the other creative fields um, and the concept art and the artists. He had to come out today and he put out a tweet to kind of tamp down on everyone going crazy on the internet about this because AI and generative AI in general is kind of the hot button issue of the time. Basically, to say that they have a bunch of concept artists on staff. All of the final concept art is going to be done by concept artists, but they're using it as like kind of early on for getting an idea of the blocking, getting an idea of that kind of stuff, and using it to kind of develop ideas with real artists doing the final work there. That's kind of a lot, but what were your thoughts on either the first part or his response or all of it in general?
it just feels like such a rake you could avoid stepping on.
For sure.
Um, that's where my head goes first. Like, if you're gonna do it, like, why would you openly admit it like that? Like, there's such an easy prediction to how people will react to that. And then to see him post again on Twitter, um, and see a lot of people like just responding and like still being like, well, that's not. It doesn't matter if the actual AI generated art is in the final product. It's the fact that you're using it and still using a substantial amount of energy and polluting all these different spaces, and it's all, every criticism of this is valid, and I respect what Larian's doing and making sure it doesn't end up in the final product, but they're still doing it, and that still rubs me the wrong way. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I think the two arguments that I saw the most when I looked through the replies a little bit was one, there is no ethical generative AI because AI, all it does is take what already exists from other people and uses it to mash together this not necessarily new thing. It just takes all of that and uses it to train itself to do a version of that, which I think is a very real criticism that eventually needs to be figured out by the courts. But that's kind of an entirely different topic. And then the other part of it is the part that I was saying before about why are you treating the artists differently than like the writers or whatever the case may be. I kind of think they're in a weird spot where some people are going to take a hard line, like some studios will take a hard line stance and say, we are not doing creative AI, if you want to call it that, like artistic AI that has to do with whether it's writing, whether it's concept art, whether it's coding. Though the coding one, I suppose, I mean, the problem with that is there's a lot of AI coding in terms of like using AI in code, not using AI to code in games already. So I kind of feel like you're in a spot where this is the landscape we're in, and 80% of these companies, if not more, are going to try this out. Because as we know, all of these big studios complain constantly about how games cost too much to make and So this is a way for them to try and bring that cost down, whether right or wrong. I don't personally know the answer. I think it probably lies on currently on the side of mostly detrimental and very little uh, benefit. But I also don't know. We're not at the end state of what AI looks like here. I'm not the no AI.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'm not going to be involved. Like I played Arc Raiders that notoriously used
Mm-hmm.
AI to put in some voice lines from actors that was approved by the actors. Um, so it's not a hard line stance for me. I would be more concerned if he was outwardly saying, "Yeah, we're going to use it to uh, you know, create characters or write lines or something like that." This feels pretty harmless to me. But I do understand the point of view of no means no. Like, we can't let them cross the line because all that means is you can just slowly step more and more and more. I think both are reasonable, but I'm still very excited for this game. I will be excited for this game no matter what, until I see gameplay. And even then, like am a loving turn-based RPG fan. So they would have to do something really horrendous for me to not be excited about this. This doesn't really change my opinion that much.
Yep. And it looks like I'm trying to I was trying to like find more of because like when I think of news reporters, I think Jason Schreier is one of the bigger names for him to like put this out and then have Swen Vink feel like he has to correct it. I was trying to see there is more clarification on Schreier's Blue Sky account. If you want to take a look at that, he has the full transcript there. If you want to see what was fully said in the interview, but um, yeah, I mean, what pretty much what Austin was saying, especially about the games that I already play that has elements of generative AI in it, like the finals and the same developers that made Arc Raiders, like both those use AI generated voice lines, which I don't love. Maybe we should fix that, but and then even also finding out that Expedition 33 has bits of generative AI in there, and I have to look at that. I only saw that a glimpse, so I don't fully know what is in that game from AI, but it is kind of just a product of where we are in this current stage of where game development is. I do think there is a way for us to use generative AI in a way that doesn't take away anything from the artistic vision of the people behind the product, and also to use it in a way that doesn't fuck up our environment and completely pollute everything around us. So I don't think we're there yet necessarily, but it's definitely something that will change and grow as we go forward. But we're not there yet.